I'm Beatrix. When I was 6 years old, my father pulled into a gas station in the middle of nowhere and left me there. No goodbye, no hesitation. He didn't even look back. I waited the entire night, convinced I must have done something wrong, that it was my fault somehow. But that moment wasn't the end of anything. It was just the beginning. My family didn't just abandon me, they erased me. From the house, from conversations, from documents, even from the will. They called me unstable, said I never really belonged. But what if none of it was about me? What if it was about something they were hiding? What kind of mother pays to make her own child disappear? And after all these years, why does my name still scare them? People always talk about the moment their life changes like it's loud and dramatic, a crash, a diagnosis, a betrayal that explodes in front of everyone. Mine wasn't like that. Mine was quiet. I was 6 when my father turned off the road and left me at that gas station. There was no yelling, no warning, just the crunch of gravel under the tires and the sound of a door closing that never opened again. I still remember the smell inside that car, old leather, cold coffee, and something else I couldn't name back then. Something final. He barely spoke during the drive, just hummed along to some old country song playing on the radio. When I pointed at clouds, making shapes out of them, he nodded absent-mindedly. I thought he was just tired, maybe distracted. What kind of child thinks this is the last time I'll ever see my dad? When we reached that place, I didn't even know its name. Later, I learned it was Elmbridge. It was winter. The sky looked heavy, like it was holding back snow. The gas station felt old, forgotten, like no one had cared about it in years. He parked near the edge, left the engine running, then turned toward me with a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Hey, sweetheart, can you do me a favor?" he asked. I nodded immediately. I always did. "Go inside and get us 2 hot chocolates. I'll be right here." I'll be right here. I held on to those words like they meant safety, like they meant he would still be there when I came back. It didn't even cross my mind to question him. I stepped out of the car, my shoes crunching against the frozen ground, and pushed open the glass door that rang like an old bell. The man behind the counter barely looked at me. His face was stiff like stone. I asked for 2 drinks, my voice small but polite. The cups were too hot, and I kept shifting them between my hands while I waited. I kept glancing at the door, expecting it to open, expecting him to walk in. 10 minutes passed, then 30, then an hour. At some point, the man asked if I was okay. I told him I was, because Dad said he'd be right back. I just had to wait. 2 hours later, I stepped outside. The car was gone. No tracks, no note, nothing. Just an empty space and a cold realization settling into my chest. Something was wrong. Something very wrong. A police car arrived around sunset. I don't know who called them. Maybe the man inside finally understood I wasn't just waiting. The officers tried calling my mother. I watched them talk quietly, their eyes flicking toward me like I was a problem they didn't want. One of them said it softly, thinking I couldn't hear. She doesn't want custody. Not custody, not me. They used words I had only heard in cartoons, abandoned, orphaned, and just like that, my life stopped being normal. I became a case. The next morning, Ruthin came, my father's sister. I had only seen her a couple of times before. She always wore too much perfume and never stayed long. This time, she looked shaken, like she hadn't expected this either. "I didn't even know she was nearby," she muttered to the officer. Then she looked at me, really looked at me. She hesitated before kneeling down. "Hi, Beatrix. I guess it's just us now." Years later, after everything had already settled into me, I learned about the envelope. A week before that drive, my father had received something in the mail, a thick envelope he refused to open in front of my mother. Ruthin found it months later, hidden away, already tampered with. Inside was a DNA test. People say family isn't about blood, like it's something comforting. For me, it was the opposite. It was the excuse he needed. Maybe he had always suspected. Maybe something didn't add up. Maybe my mother told him something that broke him. But instead of asking questions, he chose silence. He chose to leave. As a child, I thought I had done something wrong. Maybe I messed up too many times. Maybe I wasn't good enough. I spent years trying to earn back something I didn't even understand I had lost. But the truth hurt more. I wasn't just left behind. I was never meant to stay. I used to believe abandonment was the worst thing, but being erased is worse. It doesn't leave marks you can see. It leaves empty spaces where love should have been. Ruthin didn't have much. Her bookstore smelled like old paper, dust, and cheap gum. It was all she had left from her husband. Most days she looked overwhelmed, like she didn't know what to do with me. Still, she cleared out a cramped room in the back and told me I could stay as long as I needed. As long as I needed. The kind of promise people make when they don't really mean forever. She bought a small pink lamp from a garage sale and placed it beside a thin mattress stacked on crates. That light felt warm, hopeful, but I kept my bag packed for weeks. Part of me didn't believe I would stay. Another part hoped I wouldn't. School started a month later. Ruthin walked me there, holding my hand tightly, like she was trying to convince herself she could handle this. Her palm was sweaty, mine was cold. I didn't talk much at school. When kids asked about my parents, I told them I lived in a bookstore. Some didn't believe me. Others asked if I had done something bad. One boy whispered that I was the girl who got left at a gas station. That story spread fast. Even the teachers treated me differently. One spoke to me like I was fragile. Another kept asking if I was okay. But I didn't want to talk. I just wanted to disappear. One afternoon, while rain tapped against the windows, Ruthin called me to the front. She looked uneasy, like she didn't want to do this. She handed me an envelope. "It's from your mother's lawyer," she said. Inside were legal papers. My mother, Celeste Fenn, had signed everything away. I wasn't just removed, it was like I had never been there. Lines rewritten, my name gone. Ruthin tried to take it back, but I held on to it. It didn't feel like losing something, it felt like being erased on purpose. That night I heard her on the phone, whispering. "They told me not to talk about her," she said. "Said it's better if she just disappears, like she was a phase." A phase. That word stayed with me. Years later, I found a bank statement in her drawer, a transfer from Fenn and Maddox LLP, a large amount, around the same time I came to live with her. When I asked her about it, she panicked. "I didn't take it for myself," she said. "Your mother insisted, said I had to take it if I was going to keep you. I couldn't afford it otherwise." I believed her, but it still hurt. What was I, a child or a transaction? Something someone paid to get rid of? I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I went to the back room, opened the drawer under the pink lamp, and took out my notebook. I flipped to a blank page and wrote one sentence. Beatrix Fenn, no matter what they say. I underlined it again and again. That night, I whispered it like a prayer. Because if they were going to pretend I didn't exist, then I would spend my life proving that I did. I didn't realize back then that I wasn't the only one falling apart quietly. I hadn't heard from Con in years, not since the day in the courthouse when he stood beside our mother and didn't look at me. We didn't speak. We didn't acknowledge each other. I told myself it was easier that way. So when his message showed up one night, it caught me off guard. "Do you ever think about them?" My breath stopped. Them. I stared at the screen, unsure whether to ignore it or answer. Half of me wanted to erase it. The other half wanted to admit the truth, that I thought about them all the time. I typed slowly. Sometimes. Why? He didn't reply right away. Con had always been the perfect one, the favorite, the one who did everything right. Our mother showed him off like something she owned. But behind that perfect image, something had started to crack. He told me later it began with a locked drawer in our father's office. He had been looking for something simple, a charger, but the drawer wouldn't open. Curiosity made him search for the key. He found it taped underneath the desk just like our father used to hide things. Inside, he didn't find anything normal, just a thin file marked confidential. My name was printed across the top. He almost didn't open it, but he did. The report inside was cold, clinical. Words like unstable, difficult, and emotionally volatile filled the page. I was 5 years old when it was written. He asked me later why they would keep something like that. I didn't answer. I already knew. It was their proof, their excuse. It started affecting him, too. He began playing piano again late at night, quietly, when no one could hear, not the music our mother forced on him. Something raw, something real. He said it was the only thing that didn't feel fake. Then one night, my phone lit up again. A voice message. I pressed play. His voice came through, unsteady but clear. I think I understand now, and I'm sorry. I should have asked questions. I should have found you sooner. I didn't know how to be anything other than what they made me. But I think I'm ready now, if you are. I sat on the floor of my office at the counseling center, knees pulled to my chest, replaying the message 5 times. 10. I closed my eyes and heard us as kids chasing each other down the hallway, before the silence, before the divide. I typed one word and hit send. Coffee? I didn't know what I expected. Maybe he'd say no. Maybe this was a glitch in our timeline and it would collapse again the second I hoped. But he replied almost instantly. Name the place. So I did. A quiet little diner near the edge of Elmbridge, the kind with cracked booths and burnt coffee, where the past didn't matter and no one asked questions. The next morning, we sat across from each other for the first time in 22 years. He looked older, of course, but tired in a way that didn't belong to youth. You ever wonder if they just made us up? He asked, stirring his coffee with a chipped spoon. I laughed, but it wasn't funny. All the time, I said. We didn't talk about the report, not that day. We didn't need to. It was there between us, thick as fog. What mattered wasn't the file, it was the fracture it left in him, the mirror he'd been forced to hold up and realize perfection had a cost, and neither of us was prepared for what we'd uncover next. Kane and I sat in the booth long after the coffee had gone cold. The silence between us was no longer sharp. It was heavy but bearable. He fidgeted with a sugar packet while I traced circles on the rim of my mug. I don't know who I am without them, he said quietly. I let that sit for a second before replying, maybe that's the best part. He gave a sad smile but didn't argue. I wanted to ask him about the file, if he believed it, if it changed how he saw me, but I didn't, not yet. That day wasn't about dragging ghosts out into daylight. It was about recognizing that we both had them. After we said goodbye, I walked back to the bookstore with a strange ache in my chest. Not pain, not quite. More like the shifting weight of something long buried starting to stir. Ruthin was in the attic, digging through boxes for a community donation drive. I offered to help, partly out of guilt, partly out of restlessness. Most of it was junk. Old Christmas lights, paperback romances with yellowed pages, a broken lamp that had survived 3 moves. Then I spotted a metal folder shoved between 2 crates of outdated tax files. It was labeled in faded black marker, Fen, private. I knew better to ignore something like that. Inside were papers, neatly clipped. Most were bland, property records, old bills, but near the bottom was a thick envelope sealed with a wax stamp. My hands shook as I opened it. It was a copy of my grandfather's will, not the version I'd seen referenced in the news or court summaries years ago. This one named 2 heirs, Beatrix Fenn, me. I sat down hard on the attic floor, breath catching in my throat. Ruthin peeked over the edge of a box. What is it? I handed her the paper. Her eyes widened. God, I forgot this even existed. You forgot? My voice cracked. Years ago, she said, almost in a whisper. Celeste came by, said she was cleaning out some of the family records, asked if I had anything left over from your grandfather.
I didn't remember this file. I thought it was just tax junk. Why didn't you check? My voice rose. I didn't think she'd lie to me, Ruthin said, her face pale. I didn't think. But she had. Of course she had. Celeste never asked questions without motive, and she'd clearly intended to erase any trace of me, legally, financially, historically. That night, I couldn't sleep. I laid awake replaying every moment I'd spent believing I was invisible, unwanted, a fluke. But this proved I wasn't just forgotten, I was eliminated. I pulled out the will again and reread the line with my name. It was right there, black ink on aged paper. They didn't just throw me away, I whispered to no one. They buried me. The shame I'd carried for years, wondering what was wrong with me, why I couldn't be loved, morphed into something else. Not rage, not yet, but power. I wasn't broken. I was buried. There's a difference. The next morning, I called an old friend who'd gone into estate law. I didn't give her details, just asked a simple question. Hypothetically, what happens if someone illegally suppresses a legal heir? She paused, then said, "Depends, but it's serious, like felony serious?"
I thanked her and hung up. My hands were steady as I filed the will into a locked drawer in my desk at the counseling center. Then I stood in the doorway, staring into the warm, quiet space I'd built for other people to heal. They tried to erase me, I said aloud to the books, the carpet, the silence. Now let's see who they really are, when the masks fall off. I didn't need revenge. I needed the truth to breathe. The folder hadn't left my desk since the night I found it. Sometimes I'd open it just to see my name on that page again, like I was making sure it was still real, still mine. But staring at truth and using it were two very different things. So I met with Serena, a former classmate turned estate lawyer. We sat across from each other in a booth at the only decent cafe in Elmridge, her laptop glowing between us and a stack of legal pads cluttering the table. She flipped through the scanned copy of the will, her brow furrowed. "It's valid," she said finally. "Your grandfather never signed a revocation or amendment. Unless they can produce one, this document holds weight. And if they buried it on purpose, that's fraud, Beatrix. It's serious. But the second you act on this, publicly or legally, you're opening a door that won't close again. Are you sure?" I didn't answer. Not yet. Back at my office, I sat down with pen and paper, not a keyboard. I wanted the weight of every word I wrote to be felt by me, by her. I wasn't angry, not in that moment, just done being quiet. The letter was calm, measured, no threats, no accusations, just truth laid out like a chessboard. "Celeste, I have come across a version of the will that names me as co-heir. It was not revoked. I understand what this means. I have no interest in a war, but if forced, I will defend my right to exist. I ask for discretion and resolution. Silence will not protect you anymore. Beatrix." I sent it through Serena's office using a bonded courier. Within 24 hours, I got a call from Ruthin. "You sent it?" she asked. "Yes." She exhaled hard into the phone. "You're brave. But listen, Celeste doesn't respond to polite. She responds to threat. That's not who I am, I told her, but it's who she is." 3 days passed. Nothing. On the 4th morning, I found Keon waiting on the front steps of my center, hoodie pulled up, duffel bag beside him. He looked like he hadn't slept. "I'm leaving," he said. I blinked. "What happened?" "She found out I helped you, said I was jeopardizing the family name." He laughed bitterly. Dad just sat there polishing his glasses like we were talking about the weather. "You don't have to do this," I said quietly. "Yes, I do," he replied. "They don't own me either." I wanted to say I was proud of him. I wanted to hug him,
but all I could manage was to take his bag and bring him inside. That night, while he slept in the spare room, I checked my email. One new message. No sender name, no subject, just a single sentence in the body. They're prepping a media campaign. You'll be the bitter illegitimate. Be ready. I didn't know who sent it. I didn't care. I stood up, walked out into the chill of the Elmridge night, and stared up at the moon. They think dragging me into the spotlight will break me, I whispered. Then I smiled tight. Small, but real. They don't know what I've had to survive just to stand here. And just like that, they turned me into a headline. I woke up to my face staring back at me from a news alert. There it was, cropped from a photo I hadn't even known was taken. Me standing in front of the counseling center, arms crossed, tired eyes, hair pulled back on a windy day. Underneath it, the headline in bold. Estranged daughter and disoriented son. The Fenn family's quiet struggle. I clicked before I could even breathe. The article was glossy, clinical, designed to look balanced but bleeding manipulation between every line. It painted me as a troubled, bitter outsider, estranged for years due to emotional volatility and unresolved personal issues. It described Keon as recently experiencing a mental health crisis and under close psychiatric review, citing an unnamed family source. There was no source. There was just Celeste. I dropped my phone. It clattered to the floor, screen still lit. Beatrix, Keon's voice echoed through the house. He stormed in from the guest room, his face pale and jaw clenched. He held his phone up like it was burning him. They said I'm in a facility. They're telling people I'm unstable, that I broke down, that you triggered it, that I'm confused, too fragile to be taken seriously. She said I needed professional intervention. His hands shook. I haven't cried in 10 years, B. I think I'm about to now. I put my hand on his shoulder. You won't cry. Not now. Not over them. You're going to fight. He looked at me like he didn't know how. I'll help you, I promised. But we can't hide anymore. I reached out to a journalist named Emery Langston, someone I'd met through a client, someone who didn't work for clicks, but for clarity. Emery agreed to meet in person. No cameras, no tricks, just my voice, my truth. I sat across from her in the back of the bookstore. Keon stayed nearby, out of frame, but within reach. Emery placed a recorder between us and said, "Speak when you're ready." So I did. I told her about the attic, the will, the letter, the silence. I told her how Celeste tried to scrub me from existence like a redacted footnote in her perfect narrative. I spoke about shame, about growing up in the absence of answers, about how they taught Keon to see me as a shadow. I didn't raise my voice once. I didn't insult them, but I told the truth. The story ran within 48 hours, online first, then syndicated. It hit a nerve. Comments poured in from strangers who recognized their own families in mine. Survivors of silence, children of image-obsessed households, adults who had once been erased. "You're not crazy," one anonymous message read. "We saw what they did. We all did. We just didn't say anything." Old family staff, a former nanny, even a former colleague of Magnus's, who admitted he never looked anyone in the eye when your name came up. For once, I wasn't alone. The next morning, I posted the original will on my Sense website. No fanfare, no hashtags, just a clean PDF and one line typed in bold above it. You can't erase what was written in truth. It wasn't about inheritance, it never had been. It was about reclaiming the name they tried to bury, about giving people like me permission to stop apologizing for being born unwanted. But Celeste never played fair, and her next move was the dirtiest yet. The envelope was thick, stamped with gold lettering, and hand-delivered by a man who didn't bother hiding his discomfort. I didn't even have to open it to know Celeste had finally shown her teeth. Inside, a formal summons. Celeste Fenn versus Beatrix Fenn. Charges: defamation, breach of privacy, fraudulent claim to inheritance. Attached was a demand for immediate removal of my name from all references to the will. They alleged I'd forged the document, manipulated public perception, and caused irreparable harm to the Fenn family's legacy. I laughed. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was textbook Celeste. She couldn't destroy the truth, so she tried to bury it under legal jargon and PR tactics. She wasn't trying to win in court. She was trying to exhaust me, drown me in paperwork and headlines until I backed down. But she had no idea how far I'd already crawled just to stand this tall. That night, as I sat in the glow of my desk lamp, another memory surfaced, one I hadn't touched in years. I was 6, hiding behind the tall staircase at the Missoula house, my knees pressed to the floor, holding my breath, trying to be invisible. I heard my father say, "We can't carry this forever, Celeste. It'll ruin everything." And her reply, calm and cold, "Then we cut the rot before it spreads." Back then, I didn't understand. Now I did. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was damage control. And here they were, doing it all over again. The next morning, Keon knocked on my door. He looked tired but clear-eyed. He held up a folder. "I filed an affidavit," he said. My throat tightened. "You did what?" "I wrote down everything, how they handled you, how they used me, how Mom made me believe you were dangerous. I called her what she is, a woman more invested in image than truth." He set the file on the counter and stepped back. "If they're going to lie under oath, I won't stand next to them." When we walked into the Missoula courthouse that Friday morning, the air was thick with cameras and whispers, sketch artists, reporters. Half of them didn't know who I was last month. Now I was the daughter who won't stay quiet. Celeste arrived in a pristine cream suit, hair perfect, expression blank. She didn't look at me. Good. I sat at the petitioner's table. My hands didn't shake. When it was my turn, I stood. The room was dead quiet. "I'm not here to reclaim money," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not even here to punish. I'm here because when I was 6, I was thrown away. Now I'm being told I was never meant to belong in the first place. If being erased was their goal, then I'm standing here to prove I survived it." I sat back down. I didn't need applause. I needed the silence that followed. The next day, the internet exploded. Courtroom sketches of me facing down Celeste circulated like wildfire. Articles with titles like "The Daughter They Couldn't Silence" and "Family Erasure is Real. One Woman's Fight for Identity" trended nationally. I got emails from strangers, survivors, former staff. One woman, a retired housekeeper who used to work for the Fenns, simply wrote, "We knew. We all knew. I'm sorry." But I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet, because the court wasn't the only place Celeste planned to fight, and she had one last card left to play. The room was too quiet, one of those soundproof conference spaces that made every breath feel louder than it should. Fluorescent lights buzzed softly above my head, and across from me, Celeste sat perfectly composed in a beige suit and pearl earrings, like nothing about this moment threatened her. But her eyes were different. There was no fire in them, no smugness, just calculation, cold, clipped calculation. Her lawyer slid the document across the table toward me. It was crisp, freshly printed. I didn't even need to read it. "Sign this," Celeste said, voice smooth as glass. "You withdraw your claim to the will, issue a formal statement of closure, and I make all of this disappear." I stared at the pen she'd placed beside the folder, neatly aligned. A final attempt at control dressed as generosity. "And if I don't?" I asked. She tilted her head. "Then you continue down this exhausting path.
Court, press, your little supporters eventually move on. The spotlight fades. You're left holding a name no one will care about. She said it like a warning. I heard it as a promise. I didn't move. I didn't touch the pen. Instead, I let myself drift, just for a moment, back to that night, 6 years old, the gas station's flickering lights, my legs numb from cold, my hands shaking as I waited, my voice cracked from saying the same thing over and over, "Please come back." I hadn't realized until this moment that I wasn't speaking to him anymore. I was speaking to me, to the little girl I used to be, the one who needed someone, anyone, to tell her she mattered. Present-day me closed my eyes. For the first time, I whispered it back. "I'm here." I opened my eyes and looked directly at Celeste. "I'm not here for your money," I said. "I'm not here for your legacy. I'm here because you tried to erase me, and I want my name back." Her jaw clenched, but she said nothing.
I was erased from your family portrait, your estate plans, your memory, but not from reality. I exist. I survived, and you don't get to silence me again. I pushed the paper back across the table, untouched. Celeste flinched. Not visibly, but I saw it in her fingers, the tiny tremble she couldn't suppress. For the first time, she didn't look like a woman in charge. She looked cornered. 2 days later, the judge ruled in my favor. The will was upheld. I was legally reinstated as a rightful heir. Celeste's claims were dismissed. There was no jail time, no dramatic courtroom fall from grace. She left through a back exit, her lawyer shielding her from cameras. But she lost something she couldn't buy back, her version of the story. And for a woman like Celeste, that was the real punishment. That night, I stood outside Haven House, the porch light casting long shadows across the street. I held a mug of tea in both hands, warm against the December air. Snow fell in lazy flurries around me. I closed my eyes and whispered, not to her, not to the world, but to the little girl inside me still waiting outside that gas station. You survived. You were never crazy, and they don't get to write your ending. I won the fight, but healing, that would take a different kind of strength. The headlines faded faster than I expected. One week I was front-page material, estranged daughter reclaims her name, and the next I was just another story buried beneath the next scandal, the next outrage. I didn't miss the noise. Haven House returned to its rhythm, kids laughing down the hallway, paint-smudged hands during art therapy, mismatched shoes piled by the music room door. People smiled when they passed me. Some hugged me, others called me inspiring. I thanked them all, but inside I felt quiet. Not empty, not exactly, just still. It turns out winning doesn't put the pieces back. It doesn't unweight the hours I sat in the cold outside that gas station. It doesn't pull back the years of silence, of doubt, of shame. It just ends the war. Celeste never showed her face again. No press conferences, no interviews, no public rebuttal. She didn't even issue a formal apology. She didn't need to. People knew. That was enough. Kian cut contact, moved into a small apartment near the edge of town, and started teaching music therapy at Haven House. We worked in the same building most days, and sometimes we'd share lunch, but we didn't talk about her, not anymore. We just lived. I got used to the quiet, learned to enjoy the mundane grocery shopping with Ruthin on Saturdays, early walks before the kids arrived, the smell of vanilla candles mixed with poster paint and hot cocoa in the winter. I stopped waiting for justice. I started looking for peace. One night in early January, I found a letter in the back of my closet. It was written in my handwriting, years old, folded, worn, unsent. It was addressed to Celeste, page after page of questions. Why did you leave me? Why didn't you stop him? Why did you hate me for existing? I read it once, then again. Then I fed it into the fireplace. The paper curled and blackened, its edges crumbling before the flames even touched the ink. And just like that, I let it go. Some answers, I decided, don't matter anymore.
A few days later, I walked past the gas station, the same one, same cracked concrete, same tired signage buzzing faintly under the morning sky. I hadn't been back since the night everything shattered. I was going to keep walking. Then I saw her. A little girl, no more than 6, sitting on the curb beside a rusty pump, arms wrapped around her knees, alone. My breath caught in my throat. I walked over slowly, heart pounding, voice tight. "Hey, sweetie, are you okay?" She looked up, big brown eyes, flushed cheeks. "I'm waiting for my mom. She just went inside." And sure enough, a woman stepped out of the convenience store a few seconds later, calling her name. The girl smiled and ran to her without a second glance. I stood there watching, and then I cried. Not out of pain, not out of anger, but because something inside me finally let go. The little girl who had once waited alone wasn't waiting anymore. She had me now. Not every wound disappears, but some become maps, showing us how to walk away and never return. I used to believe that survival was about staying invisible, about not causing waves, not asking questions, not needing more than I was given. But I've learned something. Silence doesn't protect you. It only protects the people who benefit from your silence. If you've ever been made to feel like you didn't belong, even in your own family, let me say this to you. You do. You matter. Not because someone else says so, not because you're perfect, but because you are here, and no one gets to rewrite your story but you. In life, we don't always get apologies. We don't always get justice wrapped up in a bow, but we can choose peace. We can choose growth. We can choose to stop bleeding for people who never even tried to stop the cut. If this story made you feel something, if it reminded you of a truth you've been carrying, or a lie you're tired of living under, don't just scroll past. Let's talk. Tell me, what would you say to your younger self if you could go back? Drop a comment below. If this story touched your heart, leave a 1 or let me know where you're watching from. If it made you uncomfortable, I'd still love to hear why. Maybe that's where the healing starts. And hey, if you made it this far, you're part of this community now, so don't miss what's next. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell so you won't miss the next story that might just speak to your soul. Because sometimes a stranger's story helps us finally understand ours.